Hey there, it's Pete Thorn. Welcome to my hotel room. I am over in France still, and I'm going to answer a bunch more of your questions now that you asked me by sending me an email to my Facebook music page. It's facebook.com/guitarnerd. You can go there and send me an email and I'll get your questions as soon as I can. Now, I answered a bunch the other day just via actually replying on Facebook email because I'm so behind that they're piling up. So I promise I'll get your question, but I'll either answer it in an actual email or I'll do it in one of these videos. Okay, so moving right along, let's get started. Karsten Copenhagen asks me about the Boss Hyperfuzz. You notice I use the Boss Hyperfuzz on my pedal board from time to time. And how do I use this aggressive sounding fuzz, he said. Well, the first thing that's really cool about the Hyperfuzz, aside from the fact that I actually really love the way that it sounds, is that it works great with buffers. So my pedal board is buffered. I've got a buffered mission volume pedal on the board before everything else. And also when I use a wireless system, which I do live like 99% of the time, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but the output of any wireless system is buffered. Just the nature of it. It's going to be a low impedance output. So, with that said, using a germanium fuzz or fuzzes like traditional fuzz faces and stuff like that don't sound very good. Some fuzzes sound fine with buffers. For example, Big Muff style fuzzes generally do. So it just depends. You got to sort of weigh out all your options and then pick a fuzz that works well on your pedal board if you're in a sort of buffered pedal board situation. And I find the Hyperfuzz works great. It kind of has a few different settings. There's a sort of like a clean boost setting, which is useful, but I don't use it for that. There's another fuzz setting that I find kind of gnarly, and I don't really use that at all. But the one that I use, which I believe is the first one on the fuzz selection knob, the lowest setting on the knob, kind of sounds a lot like an Octavia to me with fuzz added. It just does this really cool Octavia kind of grindy, vintage sounding thing. You can hit the neck pickup and you hear that upper octave pop out, and it sounds really cool. And yeah, I just like the sound. It's totally different than any of the other distortion sounds I can get via my amp or via the other pedals on my pedal board. So I find it comes in really handy and it's really useful. I really dig it. If you listen to the first Pedalboard demo that I did way back when, maybe it was 2012 or something like that, there's a video on YouTube. It's got a lot of views. It's got like 350,000 views or something like that, and it says, Pete Thorn's new Pedalboard demo or something. At the beginning, I play a kind of very Pink Floyd-y sort of influenced thing with big, long sort of ambient stuff going on, and that sort of playing. And I'm using the Hyperfuzz in there, combined I think with a Phase 90 or something. I love that sound. It's really cool when you combine it with maybe like a Phase 90, some modulation effect, or maybe like a Leslie sound or something. You get some really cool kind of unique expressive solo sounds. It is aggressive, but use the neck pickup and maybe roll the tone down a bit on the guitar, and you just get this. It's gnarly, but it's beautiful at the same time. Really cool. Kind of an underappreciated pedal. All right, let's move along. So Joe Robinson asks about the Marvel Drive 3 and the MXR 5150. He liked the pedal demos I did for those pedals, and he said it seems like the MXR can get into the lower gain plexi territory, and if I could only choose one for the pedal board, either the 5150 MXR pedal or the Marvel Drive 3, which one would I choose? Well, it really depends on what you're doing. The Marvel Drive 3 is a terrific sounding pedal, and it's more of that sort of, I would say if you want more Van Halen, go for the 5150. If you want more AC/DC, go for the Marvel Drive. Free, Bad Company, those kinds of tones. Anything else that you can think of, maybe like old, ZZ Top or stuff like that, go for the Marvel Drive. Whereas the 5150 is going to do the, sort of more, that sort of like more like tight plexi gain, on up through modern 5150 amp style gain. So you can kind of base your decision on that. Now they're both terrific pedals, and will both work in a variety of circumstances. So it's best if you try them both. But that would be my best recommendation. Just depends on the sort of style you're going for. Simon asks. Let's see here. He's trying to develop proper technique for tremolo picking. He says he's gotten the technique down to a certain degree where most of the action is coming from his wrist and not his elbow, and I would say that's probably a good thing. But despite that, he feels that his right hand gets fatigued fairly quickly. Well, anytime you're getting fatigued, you're probably tensing up. and trying a little too hard. I would say that when I tremolo pick, and you can really hear it here I have a guitar here. You can really hear it when I'm not plugged in, but the faster I go, the lighter I pick. I'm not really trying very hard at all. And I use the very tip of the pick. So, you know, if you're digging in and the string sounds like that unamplified, you know, try and get it more where it's just the very tip of the pick kind of moving around the edge of the string. I could sit here and do this and without stopping for, you know, 5 minutes or something. I'm not really trying very hard at all. So it's just got to be this little sort of minimal motion thing where you're just using the very tip of the pick. And I guess this is the motion that I sort of rotating my wrist. I never really think about it that much, but kind of what I'm doing, just back and forth, very tip of the pick. And that's the best you can do. And you sort of have to actively in your mind think about lightening up your attack, like sort of, you know, think about like, you know, when you go to the dentist or something like that, and they tell you to just relax, you're tense, and you're like, no, I'm not, and you're like, you might realize, oh, I am tensing up, you know, that kind of thing. Like you have to actually in your mind, like think about relaxing, like all the way from your shoulder muscles through your arms and everything, like actually practice, like, you know, actively thinking about relaxing, and over time it'll become more and more natural and you won't have to think about it as much. That's what I found. Okay, let's see. Somebody named, I believe you pronounce your name Roy, but it's spelled R-H-O-Y. So you have a question about how I create my chords that are in my demos. You say that my demos always feature some great chordal work. Thank you very much, and sound fresh. Well, actually, I just kind of move my fingers around and try different things. I talked about it in a recent Q&A where I sort of showed how you can play a chord you might already know and sort of just move one finger within that chord one way or another and alter the chord up and see how it sounds. And that's kind of what I do. I just sort of sit there and move my fingers around and experiment. You know, I mean, I sort of know what I'm doing, but many times I'm not thinking actively about like, oh, this is a such and such chord, you know, it's a, you know, diminish this or whatever, or, you know, such and such major seventh or something. I'm not really thinking like that. I just move my hands around and I just play what sounds good. And, you know, so I end up sitting there and playing a lot of stuff that sounds terrible until I find something that I like. And just kind of through experimentation. But I'm always listening to what's going on in my head too. Like when I'm coming up with melodies or different chord progressions, you know, you sort of want to be like, it's like people joke around like, oh, I didn't write the song, it just came through me or whatever, which sounds so cheesy, but it's kind of true. You just get out of the way, like sort of just, you know, you're hearing in your head the music as it's, you know, supposed to unfold or something. And sometimes you don't have that happen, like where you got a total writer's block or whatever, and there's nothing interesting coming to you. But, you know, many times it's just like riffs that are in my head or chord progressions that are in my head, and I'm you know, walking down the street and like something comes to you or whatever, and you're like, I wonder how I'd play that on the guitar. You pick up the guitar and try and make it work. Just, you know, trying to constantly do that, like be a, you know, not clairvoyant, but, you know, allow your mind to just do its thing and just, you know, let the music come to you and don't let your fingers get in the way and sort of playing typical licks or patterns or whatever. When you're writing, just, you know, really listen to that sort of inner thing, like whatever. I'm getting so artsy-fartsy philosophical right now, but yeah, that's kind of my recommendation, is just experiment on the fingerboard, but also listen to the music in your head, not necessarily, you know, what your fingers are used to doing, or you know, falling into old patterns or riffs or that kind of thing. Just you know, almost like a singer would approach singing. I think about singers when they're improvising. They don't have a guitar to physically, you know, they don't have a physical limitation of having to put their fingers on a certain fret. You know, the voice is very free, so it's just like, you know, when you're coming up with a melody or improvising as a singer, you know, you're just letting it go through you, and you kind of have to get to the point where on the guitar you're doing that, where you're just, you know, sort of tapping into that as much as possible, I think. Okay, let's see. Zach asks, let's see, is there a benefit to recording a 212 cabinet instead of a 112 cabinet? Seems like a waste of space to buy a 212 when only one is mic'd. Well, I love recording 112 cabinets. I did the whole Guitar Nerd album with one little Bogner Cube, one of those little Bogner 112 cabinets, and they sound great. Now, they were engineered to sound like kind of like a much bigger cabinet. I know that when they were making that cabinet, they were trying to capture the sort of the punch and the balls of a 412 in a very small cabinet. So I'm a big fan of that cabinet. I think they record great. Having said that, when you get into bigger cabinets, what I find is that bigger cabinets develop more bass just naturally because they have more sort of volume inside the cabinet to do that. So a bigger cabinet can kind of sound a little less boxy and a little more, they can tend to just sort of open up and sort of have a little more everything, sound a little less compact, for lack of a better term. Doesn't mean they're going to sound better though for what you need or for the part. Like I say, I'm a big fan of 112s, but the one thing is that I noticed that, especially with a 412 cabinet, is you can turn the bass down on the amp, and you can run, like on an old Plexi Marshall, you can run the bass almost off if you're using 412s and cranking up the amp, because the cabinet develops bass. And that's how you kind of keep those amps tight. Don't run the bass too high, and then they can maybe get a little flubby. You can roll the bass way down as long as you're using a 412, and the cabinet will develop its own low end, and it's a different kind of bass, and it's actually really cool. So it's all a trade-off. Whatever works. I made my record with a 112, and I was really happy with the way it sounded. Okay, so Sam asks, have I ever tried recording a 100-watt bass amp like an Ampeg V4B with the Sur reactive load box? And if so, how does it compare to a DI? Like a DI bass sound? Well, I would say that, first of all, yeah, you could use the Sur on any amp. Doesn't matter if it's a bass amp or a guitar amp. It's rated for 100 watts. You don't want to go too beyond 100 watts, or you really risk frying it. I've fried load boxes that were rated for less than 100 watts, that were rated for like 50 and stuff, that kind of thing, and I forgot and ran too much power into them, and that thing smoked and actually physically burned up. So that's what will happen if you run too powerful of an amp into a load that isn't rated correctly. But yeah, anything up to 100 watts is fine, and it'll work great and sound great. And there's tons of IRs out there available for bass speakers. The Ownhammer guy, he's got a whole bunch of, I think, 410 as well as maybe Ampeg 610 IRs. I know there's a bunch of other ones out there, some Red Wires ones and different ones. I think probably the Two Notes folks have some in their wall of sound and stuff like that too, some bass cabinets for sure. Yeah, it's a great way to record a bass amp. And the V4B is a really good example, actually. There's not a lot of 100-watt bass amps out there that are like all tube, I don't think. I can't think of that many, but that's a great example. So that would be a terrific one to sort of stay within the correct power that the load is rated for. Neil asks, what studio monitors is he seeing in my studio, and are they powered? Or if they're passive, what power amps do I prefer? Well, all the studio monitors in my studio are powered, and so for many years I've used the ADAM or ADAM, I don't know how you say it, but the A7s. I've got an original pair of A7s. They're not the A7 Mark IIs, I think they're called, that are out now. But yeah, old A7s are about 10 years old now, and I'm very comfortable in those. I like those very much. They've served me really well. And they're powered monitor, sound terrific to me. I like all their monitors, actually. There's something about the ADAM monitors that just, I found instantly, these sound the way I'm familiar with the way a monitor should sound, or at least the way I imagine in my head. And it's kind of all in what you get used to. I used to mix on NS10s, and I was comfortable with that, and I knew how to do it. It's like on NS10s, it was like, okay, the guitar has to be kind of biting your head off, and if you can hear the bass like really well, then there's way too much bass in the mix. So you kind of had to mix bass shy with like a really aggressive top end, and then it was like, yeah, that's right, it's going to come out right. And so you get used to the speaker, and then you sort of get used to it and mix for it. But with the ADAM speakers, it's just a very natural thing. I kind of mix, proportionately things correctly where they're supposed to be. Now, I've got a new set of studio monitors in my studio, which are the Barefoot MM45s, Micro Main 45s. Much bigger speaker, and they sound unbelievable. I'm totally stoked on the Barefoot speakers, and so the ADAMs I'm still going to keep in there, and it's nice to sort of split my time between the two different sets of monitors, like a lot of engineers do. But having said that, the Barefoots are just like they have this wonderful, amazing, natural sound that sort of transitions. The Atoms, in comparison, it's like I can hear a low mid bump around like maybe 200 to 400 hertz or something like that. I can hear a sort of a low mid build up, and then I hear sort of a crossover in the top end that's kind of in a, the Barefoots just gave me a whole nother perspective on smooth top end all the way out to 20K. They just seem like really extended and very flat, whereas it's almost like I can hear the crossover point between the driver and the honeycomb tweeter thing that's in the Atom speakers. Like it sounds a little edgy and aggressive in comparison. So I'm really, really stoked on the Barefoots. They're a lot more money, but to me they're like totally worth it. Speakers are a filter on your overall final mix, and I always find it interesting that a lot of people will spend a whole bunch of money on a tube preamp or a whole bunch of money on a tube mic, or not even a bunch of money, like $1,000, which will kind of get you into a okay sort of mid-range tube microphone, and that people go out and spend that money on those things. But when it comes to spending more than say $600 on a pair of monitors, they just balk at that. Oh no, I'm just going to get these sort of budget ones, and that's great if you know how to make a more inexpensive pair of studio monitors work for you. Terrific, more power to you. But they are sort of, arguably maybe the most important component in your studio, because they're providing this overall really, really powerful final filter on everything that you hear. So every decision you make, be it recording decisions or mix decisions and all that, is coming through those things. You have to remember that and realize that if you can't hear exactly what's going on, then you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. So it's really important, I think, to, especially if you're just getting started, take some recommendations and see what's out there and get a decent pair of studio monitors. And then if you're kind of, I feel like I'm moving to sort of the next level. Like I want to up my game when it comes to mixing and tracking and stuff like that. And I feel like the Barefoots are that for me. I'm taking it to the next level. They're not inexpensive. They're not crazy expensive, but they're an investment for sure. But I'm making that investment because they've got such a stellar reputation. Everybody from those great mixers like Chris Lord-Alge and JJP and Eddie Kramer and Butch Vig and all these different people are using them. And that you got to stand up and take notice of all these sort of top mixers that do virtually everything in the rock world are using these things. So that's why I jumped in and got the Barefoot MM45s. I love them. Terrific. You can check them out at the link you see there on the screen. Okay, last question for today from Tony. He's from Spain, and says he met me at NAMM a while back, and he's got a 2014 Les Paul 59 reissue. He's super happy with it, but he says, as I know, we are always kind of messing around with pickups and trying to do different things as guitar players, checking out different things, see if you can make your tone better. So he says he's mainly a rock guy, and he wants to know if my pickups are voiced like old PFs. He's talking about Thornbucker pickups from Sir, and if the newer ones that are hotter, so specifically he means the Thornbucker Bridge model, I think, will be too much for blues or other kinds of music. If you were playing blues primarily and kind of cleaner stuff up to sort of classic rock, I think the original Thornbuckers are just terrific for that. You don't need to look any further. They're voiced like a great old set of very, very clear, very balanced PAFs. That's what we were going for, so that you can get a terrific overdriven sound, but also a lot of clarity in your clean sounds and semi-clean sounds. Tons of clarity and character is what we wanted. Now the Thornbucker Plus pickup, it's ever so slightly hotter. I mean, I'm talking it's like a maybe 5 to 10% overwound sort of situation. It's subtle, but it just gives you a little bit more mids and a little bit more grind if that's what you want. If you feel like you live mostly on the sort of in distortion land, and you want the pickup to just drive a little harder and give you a little bit more sustain, a little bit more output, that's what the Thornbucker Plus does. So it's just another option. You got to probably try them both and see which one works for you if you really want to know. I know that's not possible for most people though, so maybe go by my recommendation. If you're more rock than blues, Thornbucker Plus. More blues than rock, maybe the original ones will get you there. You can always add more gain. That's my thing with pickups. It's like with all the boosts and fuzzes and overdrives and amps built with super high gain preamps these days, there's always more gain on tap that's available via an amp or a pedal. Hot pickups were made in an era when we didn't have those things. There was very limited options as far as high gain amps and even distortion pedals and stuff. There was only a few out there. Now you've got all these options for adding gain. So why make the pickup, don't back yourself into a corner by making the pickup so hot that it just sounds kind of like one thing, like a big mid bomb that works great for overdrive but not good for clean. So that's my spiel on pickups. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for checking out my Wednesday Q&A. I'll try and get more regular with these. I missed a couple weeks, but I've just been busy on tour and stuff. But I will keep it up and keep answering your questions. Might send you an answer via email instead of in one of these videos, because I'm just trying to get caught up. I'm at like a couple 3 months behind at this point, and I'm doing my best. All right, so hey, take it easy. Please hit subscribe if you haven't. Come back and see my channel real soon. I am Pete Thorn. Take care.